Thank you all for coming today. It's really a pleasure to be here in this beautiful facility. I assume you know how nice this is. I do a lot of speaking around the country at campuses, and this is terrific. It'd be nice. I would look back when I was in school if we had something this nice. Whenever anybody introduces me, your life goes before you. But more importantly, whenever I hear that some of this stuff sounds more important than it was, it's always good to put it in perspective for people who I've never met before. And to do that, I'll tell you a little story that happened to me a couple years ago. Some of you in this room look old enough to remember, I'm putting myself in that category, can't think of his name now that I'm about to tell the story on him. I'll think of it in a minute. Paul Harvey, the radio, the famous Paul Harvey, who is still to this day the most often heard man on radio. And as he's about 85 years old, and I am 62, and I grew up in Indiana, and he was in Chicago, and so all my life I knew who Paul Harvey was. And so a couple years ago, a fella knew that I was a fan of a disc jockey by the name of Dick Biondi, who used to work out of the Northeast, but for years when I was growing up out of Chicago, he was on WLS radio there. And he called me up and he said, "We're going to induct Dick Biondi into the Broadcasting Hall of Fame. Would you like to come out to Chicago and I'll let you introduce him?" And that was like, candy to a baby, I guess. And I said, "Sure. Well, what do I have to do?" He said, "Well, you got to get a tuxedo and fly out to Chicago, and we have this dinner." And he said, "And just to make it more interesting for you, we're going to put you at the table with Paul Harvey." Well, I thought, wow, this is getting somewhere. This is, introduce Dick Biondi and sit at the same table with Paul Harvey. It's only a couple years ago. And what reminded me of this, Don Imus, who many of you probably heard up here, he's on radio in New Hampshire, was talking about Paul Harvey this week because he had been to the same dinner when one of his friends was inducted. So anyway, when I got there, Bruce Dumont said, "I want to take you over and introduce you to Paul Harvey." So there he was. He's tall, handsome, and he's standing over all dressed up in his tuxedo, and he takes me over and plops me in front of him, and he said, "Paul Harvey, I want you to meet Brian Lamb." Mr. Harvey, the gentleman that he was, looked at me and said, "What a distinct pleasure it is to meet you." And he said, "For what you've done for this country is extraordinary, and the way you've managed to bring us all together and made us, a country that followed one thing and that was very important." And he said, "And what you did in the founding of ESPN is just extraordinary." Well, I thought maybe that clearly he just made a mistake. So I waited a little while and went back to him, and I acted like I didn't hear it. But thank you very much, Mr. Harvey. I went back to him hoping to regain some real position in his life and his mind. And I said, "By the way, we've been trying to get an interview with you for a couple years now, just sit down and do a biographical sketch of your life and all that and all you've done." And he got this puzzled look on his face. And he let me finish, and he said, "Well, you got to help me out here." He says, "What would a sports network want to do having an interview with a guy like me?" So it's important that you put all this into perspective when you hear your life laid out in front of you. I suspect that the best thing I can do today is to open this up for questions. When anybody comes out to see a talk that I've given, it's almost invariably somebody who's a junkie. It's somebody who watches all the time, and they want to go out and just see if that sourpuss they see on the air is as bad in person as he is on the air. But as a way of introduction, let me just give you some brief background on what C-SPAN is. If you've never really asked the question, because people are often confused. They don't understand it because we don't spend a lot of time talking about ourselves. To start with, we're a nonprofit network. We don't make money for anybody.
Comment on your feelings of bias in other news networks. I mean, it's obvious that most other news networks have a clear bias in some of their shows or even on their overall network. I was wondering if you could comment, and is this preventable? You know what I mean? Or is this just a natural part of having news and what people want to see?
I have to give a little speech tonight to the Naki Loeb School of Communications and their First Amendment Award, and I don't want to, if anybody's going to be there tonight, I don't want to bore you with what I was going to say tonight, but I want to read you something that is after years of doing this, I've been doing this forever, and I wrote this down as part of the theme that I want to use tonight because I think it says exactly what's going on, and then I can talk about bias for a second. Because I have listened to the discussion about bias all my life. And coming in here on the car radio, I was listening to Bill O'Reilly ranting and raving about the New York Times, and I wanted to say, I'd like to say to him, and I know why he's doing it. He's not doing it because he really cares. He's doing it because he knows the audience cares. And I want to say to him, you're now the #1 cable talk show in America every night on news cable talk show. And you have a nationwide radio show. Why do you care what the New York Times says? Why are you obsessed with this? What difference does it make? You've got millions and millions of people listening to you, and the New York Times does not have millions and millions of people reading them.
He needs an enemy.
Huh?
He needs an enemy.
Well, but they all do. Take your side. The left and the right both do this stuff, and it's just, the only thing I would say to you is that you've got to understand this, and then you're home free. Here, I'll read to you my philosophy. People want news, information, and entertainment delivered from their point of view. If it's not, it's unfair and biased. In my opinion, there's no such thing as anybody in our business who's unbiased. And I'll give you an example. Talk about myself. I have a choice every week of probably 100 books that I can pick from to interview and read and interview someone on book notes, which happens 1 hour a week. I do everything in my power to kick my own biases out of that. And for instance, I make sure that I have one from the right, one from the left, one from the Democrats, one from the Republicans, one from a woman, a man, a black, a white, an Asian. It doesn't matter. Every Monday morning, guaranteed, I'll get the nastiest emails you have ever seen in your life. And it'll be always from somebody different. And they will say to me, I used to love your show until last night. You clearly showed me last night you're a man of the left. And you know, it's funny, it shouldn't bother you, but it does because I am not a man of the left nor a man of the right. I love learning how the process works. And I love learning what people think and their lives. I don't expect anybody else to look at it that way. That's my motive every day. And when I challenge somebody, I want to know why. I want to, I'll hear people give me a duplicitous answer. And without being angry, I want to say, well, it's like right now, this really interesting debate, go back to your question about the judiciary. The Democrats are standing up on the floor of the Senate and saying, yes, I know you're criticizing us for being mean-spirited about not approving these 6 people on the right side of the political spectrum for the bench. Then they'll say, but you forgot, right wing, that or conservatives or Republicans, back when Bill Clinton was president, you prevented 60 people from becoming a judge. Well, it depends on your day and what party you're in and who you believe and all that stuff. And so every single news organization I've ever been aware of is biased. Every reporter I've ever dealt with is biased. The trick is getting them to admit it. And the reason why they haven't is, and I think, I'm going to give you just 2 more minutes of this, so I really think this is the reason. Because they used to be knowingly biased 150 years ago. As the business of journalism grew up through the years and as radio and television came along, this is the reason why. 1927 Radio Act, 1934 Radio Act, Communications Act, required that radio and television stations who are licensed, they're the only ones in the society and the media who are licensed to do business. It's a license to steal. It is a license to have a monopoly, oligopoly, whatever it is in your community. You're given this by the government. They're saying to WMUR, we're going to use their studios tomorrow morning. Here, Mr. W, I don't even know who owns the station. Here is your license, and it doesn't cost you a penny. What you have to give back to us is 10%. 10% of your programming, news and public affairs. So otherwise, you can keep your license. They haven't taken probably more than 6 licenses away from radio and television stations. There are 11,000 television stations in the country, or radio stations. I used to know all these numbers, lots of them. And let me just finish just a second. So what happened years ago is that people in the news business said, you got to be balanced because you're licensed. And they used to have a thing called the fairness doctrine. It's gone. It should be gone. It was a ridiculous idea that somebody sitting in the Federal Communications Commission could determine what's fair and balanced and objective. It's gone. And so what happened over the years is that big-time television broadcasters got up in front of audiences like this and said, we are fair, we are balanced, and we're objective. And they started believing it. And then what happened in the system, people started agitating. I was involved in this. I was in the government. And our philosophy when I was in the government is open this up, break it up, bring on more voices, let the public decide what they want to watch, and that's what happened. And they still keep talking this way. And Roger Ailes was so clever, he decided to call his network fair and balanced. Every time he says that, everybody I know just chokes on it, because he became successful by sending vibes out to the Republican side of the country that we are more on your side than those other guys are. It worked. It worked beautifully. And there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with it. He's not licensed. He doesn't have any requirement to be fair and balanced. But I've heard people say, yeah, you got to be like Fox. They're fair and balanced. If you're a committed Republican and you're totally happy with Fox, think about it. And you're unhappy with CNN, unhappy with ABC, unhappy with NBC, unhappy with CBS, and you're totally happy with Fox, think about it.
We don't get C-SPAN. We don't get C-SPAN 3 on our local cable. Do you have any special programs, or do you run it along like C-SPAN 1 and 2? Do you have any special?
Where do you live?
In Manchester.
Well, Manchester's a Comcast system. And Comcast is committed to us to carry C-SPAN 3 everywhere. I don't know if anybody here is from Comcast. But they're very committed on a national basis. Did Comcast, Rick Jenkinson's here, did Comcast get this system from AT&T? They did. They did. Well, part of the problem is that AT&T was not very good to us. And the previous owner, TCI, was really not good to us. And so what's happened over the years is that we've had to catch up as these new companies buy it, and Comcast is committed to carrying it everywhere. And so consequently, I suspect in the next couple of years you'll find it on the digital and the digital service. And it's more of the same. It gives you choice. That's all it is. It gives you more choice so that you can get either more and more angry or less and less angry based on the fact that you have more and more choice, and you don't have to watch either the House or the Senate will give you something else to watch. But it's public service. Yeah, Rick?
Brian, I just wanted to ask, I know you took years to get into the U.S. Senate to get cameras in there. And I know you've been equally strident in trying to get cameras into the Supreme Court. Your stories about Senator Stevens closing the door to some of the conferences and other committee hearings is disturbing. Are you concerned at all about a trend heading back the other way of getting cameras, I hate to say out of the Senate or out of the House, but are you sensing that at all, that there's just too much focus on what's going on and people are afraid of letting people see what's going on?
Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous about the trend of politicians. This is not new, but the politicians are over controlling their access to the media, and it's free country. You can do this, but it's just a concern. I don't think the world's coming in. Let me just ask you this, and you don't have to. This is a rhetorical question, but do you really have trouble making up your mind as to which side you support? I mean, how the people in this room who, and I suspect you wouldn't be here if you weren't interested in politics, you weren't interested in government, you weren't interested in communication. I mean, do you really have problems in this room deciding in the end who you're going to support? I would guess that most people here are very comfortable with who you're going to vote for, who you support, and how you feel about this. And I've often said this to people, what you're really worried about is that dumb jerk down the street. We get this all the time on the call-in show. Somebody will call up mad as heck at me saying, you know, you didn't cross-examine that guy. You know, if that had been a liberal, you'd have beat him up. You didn't cross-examine. And I've said it on the air before. You know, what you're not concerned about yourself. You know, you figured it out a long time ago. You're worried about that clown down the street that never does get it your way. But I'm concerned just as a citizen, and I'm concerned as a telecaster or a cablecaster, that politicians are figuring out ways time and time again not to be open. I'll tell you a story. A couple years ago, when the Republicans came into power, anytime you have a shift in government, it's a time to pounce, because new people come in and they get new ideas and they're more open for a time. And so we decided, with the support of our industry, and Rick was a big supporter of ours, Continental Cablevision out of Boston, and worked this whole New England area, we decided that we would offer the House and the Senate an opportunity to let us put our own cameras in their chamber. Right now, those cameras belong to them, and they run them, and they're heavily restricted on what they can show. So we thought, the Republicans have been open. Newt Gingrich kind of said it out loud. I've got my start on C-SPAN, all this stuff. We go to them and say, all right, now that you're in power, how about letting us in? We'll put our own cameras in the chamber, and we'll get a truer picture of what's going on. Not a big difference, not huge, not going to change your way you're going to vote or anything like that, but it'll just be truer. And kind of got some nods. Yeah, maybe we can do that. Well, I went to see a member of Congress who was in the majority, Republican, chairman of a major committee, a guy I'd known for years, and I could talk straight to him with the door closed. And I went into him and I said, I don't want to waste my time running all over this Capitol if we're not going to have a chance to get this. I said, give it to me straight. What chances do we have of getting our own cameras in the House of Representatives? And he told me a story that I've never forgotten, and you won't either, because it's so illustrative of what's going on in only some people's minds. He said, you know, I got to tell you, during a lot of the debate on the floor of the House, I and some of my colleagues play basketball in the gym. And he said, what happens is when there's a vote, we don't like to, you know, we got our sneakers on and we're playing basketball, and we don't like to change everything, so we throw something on very quickly and leave our gym shoes on. Think about this. If your cameras are in the chamber, you're going to show the audience that we got our gym shoes on. Well, balloon popped for the 750th time. You know, you turn your tail around and just walk out of the office saying it'll never happen. And then I saw a quote somewhere. Tom DeLay, the new majority leader, said, over my dead body will your cameras ever be. And that was said in a caucus meeting behind closed doors. He never said it in public. There's no proof that he ever said it. But we never got our cameras in. And the way they dealt with us, by the way, was they just forgot it. Bob Dole was in the Senate at the time, and he issued a press release first day. You know, we'll take Lamb's request under advisement. We'll get right on that. That is the last moment in his life that he thought about television cameras operated by C-SPAN in the Senate. I can go through tons of examples. They're not going to kick us out of the House. They're not going to kick us out of the Senate. Some of them would like to. They would. They'd love to kick us out. They don't want you to see what they're doing. And they would tell you, if they had you in a room like this, say, look, let me tell you how this really works. I'm obviously in Washington on your behalf. And I think that's true. Now, I want to come back to Washington, but I'm there on your behalf. And what I want to do is bring the most money to the state that I can. This place wouldn't be here without Senator Judd. So I want to bring the most to the state. And you, as a resident of this district or of this state, say, yeah, I can see that. You're not getting up every day. You don't live in Washington like I do. You think about the country. You think about New Hampshire, your life, your day. That's the way it should be. So they're not out to get you. They're out to get the most amount of money back to the state that they can possibly do, and they'll do whatever it takes to do that, short of breaking the law. And in some cases, as we've seen over the last few years, they'll even break the law. They want to be there. One of the things about this job is they like it. People that go to Washington like it. I don't know why. Dan Rostenkowski yesterday on that show said that he talked to members while he was in town, and that one of them told him that he spends 30% of every day calling people for money. And what a disgusting way to spend your day. There's a positive side to it. Go to the gentleman in the back. The positive side is he's got to come back to the district. The problem is he ain't coming back to the district. He's going to the pot of gold that comes from any direction but the district, because of all these lobbying organizations that are quite willing to write the checks if they can get access. So it's very complicated, and if you're not paying attention, you begin to not care, and if you don't care, you don't vote, and if you don't vote, again, they're looking for one more vote than their opponent. And they win. And if you say to yourself, and I can see where a young person would say this today, I want to be a politician. I want to get elected to office. I want to go to Washington, because once I get there, and if I only stay around for 6 years or so, then I've got a ticket to ride. I can triple, double, quadruple, whatever my salary after I'm there, because I'm a former member and I have access. And when I first got there, I never heard that. I never felt that. I never saw that. It didn't happen nearly as much. You got 165 former members of Congress who are now registered lobbyists in Washington, D.C. And I've always said, and this is not to be offensive, but I've always said, if you loved your district so much and you cared about nothing more than your constituents, why did you stay in Washington after the time was up? You know, they told you that for 30 years. The people of the 2nd District of New Hampshire are the greatest people in the world. I love this place more than any place else in the world. I'm going to stay in Washington. Yes, sir.
Picking up on the Rostenkowski thing, the thing that he said after the 30% of his time was that he had to leave his congressional office, and some of those are buried way back in the hallway, so it's a long walk, especially if you're on the 4th floor of Cannon or Longworth or whatever. Go all the way downstairs, go outside, walk a block or two, or get a cab to drive you over there, and then go and sit in a little room where there's a cubicle and do nothing but dial for dollars. And I found that absolutely fascinating. I know they're not allowed to do it from their congressional office, but it would drive me nuts to have to do that every day and put that time in there and then get rebuffed.
Wait, it's only about a block and a half from the House. And the Republicans have the Eisenhower Center, which is over there, and they can go do that there. And then the Democrats have the Democratic National Committee. Let me just say something, because I think I leave the wrong impression sometimes. These people who are elected to Congress are enormously likable individuals. When you get close to them, the first thing your reaction is how much you enjoy their company when they're being what they really are. That's how they got there. They're not bad people. They come out of these districts around the country with the right intent. They scrap like crazy when they're running in their districts to raise money. The first step, they'll never be better at it than their first run. They're as excited and as idealistic as you'll ever see them again. And so don't get the wrong idea. I mean, I was standing around Dan Rostenkowski yesterday morning having our chat. I thought to myself, this is an enormously likable human being. You can see why he was so powerful and so important. You can see it right up close. I mean, this is a guy, he puts his arm around you. Oh, Brian, good to see you again. I mean, he means it. It's not phony. The problem comes after time and time again, election after election, and people, by the way, I used to be an aide to a senator. We used to joke about the big, everyday senator. You know, everybody on the staff would run around. Oh, there's the senator, you know. And the entourages. I always judge people who come to C-SPAN based on the vanguard or the phalanx, we call it. How many people do they have with them? You know, and it's funny. I don't want to make a joke out of it, but it's funny. People will say, it's a 4 this morning. The biggest number yet's, I think, 8. A human being arrives to do a call-in show, and 8 people come with him. I can't tell you who this is, but it's a United States Senator. No, you don't. You don't know who this is. It's a United States Senator. Nobody from here. No, but he comes. He came the other day, and he's. How do I say this? He's not. I can't. I'll give it away. I really don't want to do this. But let's put it away. He's not the most important person in the room, but he's a senator, and he's got 2 security aides, and it's serious. I mean, I live a mile from the Pentagon. Believe me, it's serious down there, and it scares you to death every day. But he's standing in our hallway, the aide, the security guy, plugging his ear. He's standing in our hallway. He's been in there for 15 minutes, you know, and one of us walked in, and he calls somebody else over and says, "Who is that?" This guy's not even that important that he's shadowing. And the guy's got a car and a driver, a couple security people. And you got people going around going, all day long for 30 years, you begin to think that you're special and that you can do special things. It's human nature. You have to have almost somebody whispering in your ear, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. You're not that important, you're not that important. And it's not just, by the way, people who are elected office, people in the media are that way. That's another great one. I love people in the media coming around with aides with, you know, I will not let another human being ever go with me anywhere. No, I mean, the aides are running around with the cell phones, acting like it's important. Whoever this person is important. What a bunch of baloney. We're all human beings trying supposedly to transfer information from one person to the other, you being the other person out there. Should not be stars, should not be celebrities. And it's gotten away from us, believe me. And it's up to you, the populace at large, to stop fawning. Stop fawning. They're spending your money. They're getting your eyeballs on the television and shipping it out to advertisers. They're pocketing a tremendous amount of money. Stop fawning about people in public life. They're not worth it. None of us are worth it. If you want to fawn over somebody, fawn over a scientist, fawn over the guy that made the satellite, fawn over a doctor, somebody who is a teacher. Teachers are the most unsung heroes in this country. There are some fabulous teachers, and they never get credit for anything. And they're always talked about as being the worst thing in our society. They don't do their job. They're complaining all the time. I have been in so many classrooms in the last couple of years. I've never seen a bad teacher yet. They're out here. So message is, more than anything else, is that we're getting what we deserve, and if you're going to ever see it change, we're going to have to change ourselves. I do feel strongly about it, yes.
This has been a very interesting conversation. I came primarily to find out what you might know is happening in Washington to encourage the pursuit of this war for survival that we're in.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last part of it.
About the war. Can you have any comments about
The war.
what's going on about the war we're in? You remember in the Near East?
I doubt if you could ask me a more difficult question, or one that I mean, I have my own opinions on it, but I really don't think I should get into it. I mean, it's, at this stage in the game, it's so complicated that you can make a flip statement, and on both sides they're being made every day. It's gonna be interesting. I mean, I wish the public at large was paying more attention than they are, both for those who are for it and those who are against it. I'd like to see I will say this about it. I think that getting into it, we had a very I think we had a not very large debate over it. We carried every minute of it, and there were hours and hours and hours of it, but the public at large didn't pay attention, and before long we were there, in it, and if they're going to get concerned now, it's starting, I don't want to be quoted on this because I don't want to get into this argument, but it's starting to feel a little bit like 1968 right now. And I was in the Pentagon as a naval officer in 67 and 68. I know what it felt like. I remember the night that Lyndon Johnson quit, March the 30th or 31st, 1968, and it was a great shock to people. I was the person who, week after week, read on Thursdays at the Pentagon in 67 and 68, I was responsible for reading the war casualties for the last week. I was safe in my little home in Arlington, Virginia, and I never had to worry about it. But every week, and I mean, when I would do 123 dead from the last week, you know, we're talking not very significant numbers now, but every dead is important. And I saw it. I went to the rallies in my jeans on Saturday afternoons to find out what the rallies were really like, not what the media was telling me they were like. I've been through all that. I never, ever thought it would happen again, to have the same kind of a mood established in our country. And, you know, it's such a delicate thing right now because there are people in this room who are rabidly for what we're doing and those who are rabidly against it. And I will say this, that now that the public's starting to pay attention, for the right or the wrong reasons, we may get a debate going on this thing. It may end up being the debate next year that we have, especially if the economy gets better and better. And there's no way of knowing at this stage, but if it heads in the right direction, we may get the debate, but it's a little late. Yes, sir.
This time of year,
Not, yeah, you mean the terrorists? Yeah. Well, I live in a building, I live in our offices are in a building that couldn't be more appropriately placed for mischief. And we have a discussion with the building once a month, and I'm not very happy with what the building has done. They know it. I say it every day. I'm 1 block from Union Station, which is just sitting there waiting for mischief. I'm 1 block from the Capitol. I live 1 mile from the Pentagon. When the plane crashed into the Pentagon, I went home that night and could smell smoke in my bedroom. I feel, I'm not nervous, but every day of my life, every day I get up, I feel like I'm right in the bullseye. So we can't get a whole lot closer to it than that. A lot of people have forgotten, though, which is interesting. And it's you know, every day you just hold your breath that when's the next attack. Yes.
How do you feel about public television putting the faces and names and rank and home, town, and state on every night? Do you think that that's different than the Vietnam War when, you know, we didn't really know who was dying, and now we can sort of see those faces?
I don't have any feelings about that. We have not done that. I would say to you that one of the reasons that they can do it is that the numbers aren't enormous. If there were the numbers we had in Vietnam, they wouldn't be able to do that. I must say, I'm more concerned as a journalist standpoint. We can't take our cameras to Dover to show the returning caskets. I just think that's a bad idea. Again, a part of the system of control. We have not been able to take our cameras into Walter Reed Hospital and interview the injured. There have been 1,200 injured over there and people sitting there without limbs and all that stuff. And I don't want to do it for sensational reasons. I want to do it because they're our servicemen. They have made the ultimate sacrifice. Let's hear what they have to say. We're not going to dwell on it. We've given Don Rumsfeld hundreds of hours of coverage to say everything he ever wanted to say. There are 2 sides to every story, and I don't like being manipulated. I mean, that's why C-SPAN's there. It came out of my experience in the Vietnam War, my part of it. There took hundreds of other people to make it happen. But seeing the Vietnam War and the way the media and all interacted with the government and the media both were wrong in my opinion, and the only way to solve part of that problem is to make it an open system. And we've tried the best we can to make it an open system where you don't have to depend on what I think, and you don't have to depend on what just one or three or networks think about what's important. Yes, sir.
Actually, I think that's all we have time for today. So at this point, I'd just like to thank Mr. Lamb for coming, and for our appreciation, we have a little token of our gratitude. So thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming. I appreciate it.